absence of true focus. It was a time back in two moments. There was a moment at the end of the Clinton presidency in 1999-2000. There was a very strong deals which were happening. Annexations were very well controlled. There were a lot of deals which were being put because the world had focus and attention on this specific problem. Unfortunately, all what's happening in the region is not serving the Palestinian cause and is giving very little pressure on Israel to act in any fashion or respect any particular regulations.
Maybe this is why Clinton left and his term was not... Anyway, this is not the issue, but let me here take it from other perspective. As Egypt now is or has already been put in office or in its post, a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council, and now it carries the burden of Middle East and African issues as well. From your point of view, how do you view the reaction of the international community towards Israel and what's going on, and how can Egypt play a role in that, in its 2 years as a member?
I think, and it's back to the point which I just made. The world has very little attention span now of because there's so much going on. There's so much, unfortunately, in the past 5 years, and specifically in the Middle East region, so many problems happening everywhere, where unfortunately the Palestinian cause has started to take a back seat to all what's happening. I mean, you have boiling issues, Syria, you have Libya, you have Yemen, and then the Palestinian cause, because it's been the longest of all of them, is starting to carry lesser and lesser attention, save for some of the humanitarian aspects. Now, the role that Egypt needs to play, or is expected to play on the Security Council, there is a lot of attention is now being put on how much, first off, it's a very important appointment at a time where the Middle East need a true representative or a true champion of their cause in light of the situation we've just discussed. So a lot of hope is being put on how to schedule or how to tie those hot topics, how to tie them down with particular workable solutions to all of those issues, including the Palestinian cause.
If I may take it here that given that we, Egypt, and of course have been saying that for very long times, and even these words were reiterated by President Sisi himself when he said that the Palestinian, as long as the Palestinian cause continues, then there is a creative atmosphere, or a conducive atmosphere rather, for terrorism. And terrorism is something that is not really threatening the region, but it turns on those even who created terrorism. Yeah. Then from your point of view, how far can the world look at this particular issue from that angle?
I think it's pretty much important, but now we're having several breeding grounds for terrorism, and the more you have international involvement, and you have several parties basically taking place on the ground, the more you have specific militias, specific groups being formed to counter other groups. So I believe in this particular situation, yes, all those problems which we are seeing are a conducive environment for forming terrorist groups. I mean, this is the saying, but it holds true ever since the Russian Afghanistan conflict, which has seen the creation of the first
Taliban.
Yes. You have the Taliban, and then you basically and this is basically what happens. Out of those crises comes the good, the bad, and the very bad.
So far, we've seen only the very bad of it. Yeah. Right, and we move on to the World Bulletin and Salvation, the new war tool in Syria. So we're moving to Syria. 23 people died of starvation last month in the blockade town of Madaya, northwest of Damascus, a new report revealed. Starvation, bombings, killings, too many parties in the battleground. I mean, Syria here is a real chaotic scene with no breakthroughs so far. Now, how do you view the issue of Syria particularly? And of course, Egypt has always said that its position that Syrian peoples should be choosing what they really want. But are Syrian people able really to choose who or what they want at this particular stage when there are many, many parties playing in the battleground?
Syria, we've just described Libya as a fluid situation because there's no specific party that holds any power on the ground. People in Libya are trying to create their own map. Now, Syria is a fight for survival. It's a different story. It's a fight for survival. You have, for instance, Al-Assad regime, which has been trying to hold itself strong for now, going on 5 years. And you have several factions which are starting to go against each other. Some of them are growing tired of each other, developing new factions to go against them. So several people are basically, several forces are contending for power on the ground. You also have several wars by proxy going on. The West on one end, you have Iran and China on other end, and Russia. So it's out of all the problems which we're seeing in the Middle East. This one is far more complicated because it's a high stake war, and several parties are involved in this particular war. Now comes to the point of self-determination that the Syrian people have to determine. I think the concept is great, and this is definitely what needs to happen at the end of the day. But
the application
of a referendum election in war-stricken zones has never ever worked before.
Yes, very much indeed. And we move on to even a more headline, just to make it more complicated. I mean, here the Daily Star in Iran accuses Saudi of airstrike on Yemen. Now, the issue is not Iran accusing Saudi strikes, but rather of carrying airstrikes on Yemen, but rather what happened, and Iran has been carrying on with blunt interference in the very domestic affairs of Arab countries. And of course, Saudi Arabia is one of the most targeted of its interference. Now, how do you view the situation and of course this recent severing of relations between Saudi and Iran? Of course, Saudi has kicked out the Iranian diplomats from its lands as persona non grata, and it said that they are really violating all the international laws by interfering in the domestic affairs of the Arabs. So how do you view the situation, and how complicated the situation has become, particularly in areas like Syria, Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and all the...
It's been this has been building up. It's been building up between the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Iran. It's been building up ever since Iran has insisted on advancing the nuclear program, the lifting of the blockade from Iran. So you have two very strong nations contending for power. So my assessment is you're never going to see, thankfully and hopefully, any strong face-offs between the two nations, but such sort of barrage of actions will continue. I mean, there are the Saudi embassy has been stormed in Tehran. There are talks that that Iran is not going to permit people to go to the Hajj or the pilgrimage in the next year. So you'll see such barrage continuing as the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia looks at Iran as a danger in the region, who's trying to meddle in several affairs, notably the Syrian affair, trying to influence and controlling Hezbollah in other part of the region. So you have
sectarian condemnation.
Absolutely. This is exactly.
Yes, and this is exactly the seriousness and the threats that is really, we are awaiting to see the results of this. Unfortunately, my time is out. I have to end it here. Dr. Mohamed Foad, Member of Parliament and Economic Expert, thank you very much for being with us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear viewers. Many thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the top stories coming right after this program.